The large room was quiet, too quiet. Ambassador Zethkara walked slowly to the center of the Galactic Council chambers. Her body was made of crystal that caught the light and threw it around the room in tiny rainbows. But today those crystals were shaking. She was scared. For 300 years, 17 different alien races had lived together in peace. They shared technology, traded goods, and helped each other when problems came up. It was a good life, a safe life. But that safety was gone now, friends, she said, and her voice came through the machines that let all the different aliens understand each other. The Karvak swarm has eaten 43 worlds in the last year. Our space fleets cannot stop them. They learn from every weapon we use. They find ways around every plan we make. We are all going to die. Jake Morrison sat in the back of the room where the humans were allowed to watch. He was an old soldier with gray hair and scars on his face from battles long ago. The human group had only been allowed to come to these meetings for 5 years. That was when the aliens first found Earth and learned that humans lived on what they called a death world. Most aliens could not understand how anything could live on Earth. The weather was too wild. The animals were too dangerous. The earthquakes and storms and volcanoes made no sense to them. To aliens, Earth was like trying to live inside a tornado while being chased by monsters. Zethkara kept talking. She made pictures appear in the air that showed destroyed planets, dead worlds with nothing left but rock and dust. The Karvak do not just take over planets, she said. They eat everything. Every plant, every animal, every person. They leave nothing behind. We lost Tafara 3 months ago. We lost New Zendros last week. Yesterday, we lost Harmony Station with 12 million people on it. The leader of the council was a giant bug-like creature named Vrexdam. He was twice as tall as a human and had 6 arms. When he talked, his mouth parts clicked together like scissors. We have tried everything, he said, sounding tired and defeated. Our best. Scientists cannot match their ability to change and adapt. Our strongest weapons only work once before they figure out how to stop them. Maybe it is time to start moving everyone away from the danger. That was when Jake Morrison stood up. His boots made loud sounds on the metal floor.
Alien.
The room turned to look at the human section. Most of them had never paid much attention to humans before. Humans were new. Humans were weak. Humans came from a scary planet, but that did not make them useful. Morrison was not a big man, but something about the way he stood made him seem larger. With respect, Council Leader, you have not tried everything yet. The room exploded with noise. Aliens chittered and beeped and made sounds that the translation machines had trouble keeping up with. Vrexdam's mouthparts clicked faster, which Morrison had learned meant the Bogalian was annoyed or confused. Human Morrison, Vrexdam said, your people have been part of our galaxy for almost no time at all. What could you possibly know that? Our combined knowledge of thousands of years cannot solve. Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might make if sharks could smile. You can solve this problem. You just need to ask the right people for help. An alien that looked like a walking tree made a sound, like wind through leaves. The translator said this meant laughter. Humans, the tree alien said, you live on a world that would kill any civilized being in minutes. But that does not make you warriors. You have been in space for less than a century. You have never fought a real war against another species. Morrison looked around the room at all the different aliens. Some looked like animals from Earth, but wrong somehow. Others looked like plants or rocks or things that had no name. Of them were staring at him like he was a child who had spoken up at an adult meeting. You're right, Morrison said. We've never fought a war against another species in space. But we've been fighting wars against our own planet since the day we learned to make fire. We've been fighting wars against each other for just as long. Every day on Earth is a war just to stay alive. Zethkara's crystal body made a soft ringing sound, which was how her people showed confusion. But how does this help us? The Karvak have technology we cannot understand. They have numbers beyond counting. They adapt to everything we do. Morrison walked down from the human section toward the center of the room. Other aliens moved away from him without thinking about it. There was something about humans that made other species nervous, even though most humans were smaller than the average. Galactic citizen. Let me tell you about my planet, Morrison said. On Earth, the weather can kill you. Heat that melts metal in summer, cold that freezes your blood in winter. Storms with winds that can throw cars around like toys. The ground shakes and splits open. Mountains explode and pour out melted rock. The air itself can become poison. Kept walking as he talked. The animals on Earth spend all day trying to eat each other. We have creatures with teeth longer than your arm, creatures that can crush a vehicle with their jaws. Creatures so small you cannot see them, but they can. Kill you in hours. Plants that can poison you if you touch them. Insects that can kill you with one bite. The aliens in the room were very quiet now. They were starting to understand something, but they were not sure what. And in the middle of all this, Morrison said humans not only survived, we became the top predator. We learned to make tools that could kill things bigger and stronger than us. We learned to work together to defeat enemies that should have been impossible to beat. We learned to turn everything around us into a weapon. He stopped in the center of the room and looked up at Vrexstam. You want to know what we can offer that your combined knowledge cannot? We can offer something that no species in this galaxy understands, because you all evolved on safe worlds where survival was easy. Morrison paused and let his words sink in. Around the room, translation machines worked overtime as aliens whispered to each other in dozens of languages. I can offer you predators, Morrison said finally. Real predators, not just hunters, but killers who learned their trade on a world that was trying to kill them every single day. You want to defeat the Karvak? Then you need to call in the one species in this galaxy that knows how to fight dirty, how to cheat, how to turn an enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Vrexstam's clicking mouthparts had gone completely still. Are you saying that humans would fight the Karvak for us? Morrison's smile got wider and somehow more frightening. I'm saying that for 5 years you've been looking at humans and seeing primitive newcomers from a dangerous world. What you should have been seeing is a species that survived and conquered the most dangerous world any of you have ever heard of. He looked around the room one more time. The Karvak adapt to weapons and tactics, right?
Wow.
They learn from every battle and get stronger. That works great against species who fight the same way their ancestors did for thousands of years. Humans have never fought the same way twice. We adapt faster than they do because we've had to adapt or die since we first stood up on 2 legs. The room was so quiet that the hum of the air recycling system seemed loud. Every alien was staring at Morrison, and for the first time, they were not seeing a primitive newcomer. They were seeing something that might be very dangerous. So yes, Morrison said, we will help you with your Karvak problem, but understand something first. When you ask humans for help with a war, you're going to get human-style war.
Oh, yeah.
And human-style war is not clean, it's not polite, and it's not fair. It's whatever it takes to win. He turned and walked back toward the human section. Think about it, he called back over his shoulder. Let us know when you're ready to fight fire with fire. 3 days had passed since Admiral Morrison spoke to the Galactic Council. 3 days of meetings, messages, and phone calls that traveled faster than light between Earth and every human colony in space. Now Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the command deck of the Earth defense ship Retribution and watched something that should have been impossible. Dozens of human ships were coming out of hyperspace. Big ships, small ships, ships that looked like they were built to ram through asteroids. Ships that looked nothing like the peaceful exploration vessels the aliens had seen before. These ships were ugly and covered in armor, and weapons, pointing in every direction. They looked like they were built by people who expected to get into fights. All ships are here and ready, Captain, said Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker from his station. The lights on his control panel blinked green, which meant good news. The Wolverine battle group is here. Phantom Fleet is here. Iron Legion is here. Everyone is waiting for orders. Hayes nodded as she looked at the big screen that showed all the ships around them. Each human ship looked different from the pretty smooth ships that other aliens built. Human ships looked like chunks of metal that had been hammered into shape by people who'd cared more about winning fights than looking good. Every surface had armor. Every corner had guns. They were built by a species that knew what real fighting looked like. Message coming in from Admiral Morrison on the ship Leviathan. Called out Communications Officer Amy Chen. The big screen changed to show Morrison's face. Behind him, Hayes could see the inside of a human command center. It was nothing like the clean, bright control rooms that aliens used. This place was dark and red with warning lights. People moved quickly between stations covered in screens and buttons. Everything looked like it was designed for one purpose: war. Lisa Morrison said, and his voice was serious, "You are looking at the front line of Operation Nightmare. For 5 years, we have been pretending to be peaceful explorers who just wanted to make friends. We let the aliens think we were weak and new to space. Today, that lie ends." Hayes felt a cold smile cross her face. She had been waiting for this day since first contact. Every human in the military had been waiting. They had watched alien news reports about the unstoppable Karvak swarm and known that they could help. But they had to wait. They had to let the aliens ask for help first. The aliens wanted help, Morrison continued. They are about to learn what help looks like when it comes from people who grew up on a world that tried to kill them every day. They wanted to see what humans can do in a real fight. They're going to get their wish. Hayes straightened up in her captain's chair. Round her, the crew of the Retribution prepared for battle. These were not the same humans the aliens had met 5 years ago. These were soldiers from Earth, a planet where everything was dangerous, and survival meant being tougher and smarter and more dangerous than everything else. "What is our first target, Admiral?" Hayes asked. Morrison's image changed to show a star map with red dots marking enemy positions. Kepler Station. Intelligence reports say the Karvak are gathering there for their next big attack toward the center of the galaxy. They have over 300 bioships in that system, getting ready to eat more worlds. The star map zoomed in to show a solar system with a space station surrounded by organic-looking enemy ships. The Karvak bioships looked like giant sea creatures that had learned to live in space. They pulsed and moved like they were alive, because they were alive. Each ship was grown, not built. 300 ships, Hayes said, looking at the display. That's a lot, even for us. Morrison's smile was cold and sharp. Lisa, these aliens have never seen what happens when humans really try to hurt something. The Karvak have been winning because they fight civilized enemies who follow rules and try to be fair. They don't follow rules, and we're not going to be fair. Around the galaxy, other human fleets were moving into position. Ships that had been hidden in empty space for years were finally turning on their engines and heading toward battle. Weapons that had been tested in secret were being loaded and prepared. Plans that had been made in hidden bunkers were finally being put into action. The aliens had thought humans were peaceful because humans had chosen to be peaceful. Now they were about to learn the difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight. On the bridge of the Retribution, Hayes looked at her crew. These were people who had trained their whole lives for space combat. They came from a world where storms could level cities, where earthquakes could split continents, where the animals and plants and even the bacteria were constantly trying to kill everything else. They were the children of a planet that had taught them that survival meant being willing to do whatever it took to win. "Signal all ships," Hayes ordered. "Set course for Kepler Station. Maximum speed." The human fleet began to move. Unlike alien ships that glided smoothly through space like fish through water, human ships accelerated like bullets fired from guns. Their engines burned so hot that they could be seen from other solar systems. They moved like predators who had spotted prey and were closing in for the kill as the fleet traveled toward their target. Reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were appearing in systems where no humans had ever been seen. Before they came out of empty space, out of asteroid fields, out of the dark areas between stars, they had been there all along, watching and waiting. The peaceful exploration ships that aliens knew about were just the tip of the iceberg. The real human fleet had been hiding, studying, learning everything about galactic military technology. And while they learned, they had been building ships and weapons designed specifically to fight the kind of war that was coming. On alien worlds, Military commanders looked at their screens and tried to understand what they were seeing. Human ships that were twice as heavily armored as anything in the Galactic fleet. Human weapons that used technology the aliens had never seen before. Human tactics that made no sense according to everything they knew about space warfare. Karvak had adapted to fight every known form of galactic military technology. They had learned to counter energy weapons and kinetic weapons and exotic particle beams. They had grown armor that could stop anything the Galactic fleet could fire at them. Had developed healing abilities that let them repair damage faster than enemies could cause it. But they had never fought humans. They had never faced an enemy that had learned warfare on a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. They had never faced predators who had spent their entire evolutionary history finding new ways to kill things that were bigger and stronger and better armored than they were in the command center of the Leviathan. Admiral Morrison looked at reports coming in from human fleets across the galaxy. After 5 years of pretending to be harmless explorers, humanity was finally showing its true face to the universe. Signal all commands, Morrison ordered. Operation Nightmare is now active. Rules of engagement are simple. No Karvak ships escape. No Karvak breeding facilities survive. We end this threat completely and permanently. Around him, his staff began implementing battle plans that had been refined and tested for years. These were not the simple, straightforward tactics that galactic militaries used. These were complex, multi-layered strategies designed by a species that had learned warfare from fighting their own planet and each other for thousands of years. The Karvak swarm had never known fear. They had never met an enemy they could not eventually defeat. They had never faced anything that could match their ability to adapt and evolve. They were about to meet humanity. And humanity had been adapting and evolving in the cruelest school. In the galaxy, for millions of years, the hunt was about to begin. The Karvak bioships floated in space around Kepler Station like giant organs that had been ripped from some massive creature. Each ship was alive, breathing, and pulsing with its own heartbeat. They were beautiful in a horrible way, like deadly flowers that grew in the vacuum of space. For 300 years, nothing had been able to stop them. Commander Rick Stevens watched the enemy fleet through the special sensors on his stealth ship, the Silent Death. His ship was designed to hide in space, to watch enemies without being seen. Around him, his crew worked in dim red light that was easier on human eyes during combat. To any alien who saw the inside of a human warship, it would look like a vision of hell. I count 317 bioships, reported Sensor Specialist Kate Morgan. Her voice was calm and professional, even though she was looking at enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. They are staying in their usual formation, with the big ships protecting the smaller breeding ships. Stevens nodded as he studied the enemy formation on his screen. The Karvak strategy was simple, but it worked. They threw massive numbers of ships at their enemies, while their bioships learned to counter whatever weapons were used against them. It had worked perfectly against every galactic military force they had ever fought. The bioships were not just ships. They were living creatures that could heal damage, adapt to new threats, and even reproduce new weapons if they found something that worked well. When energy weapons hit them, they grew new armor. When kinetic weapons damaged them, they healed the wounds and became stronger. They were the perfect enemy. Impossible to surprise, impossible to defeat permanently, and they got stronger with every battle. Send the signal to all ships, Stevens ordered. Execute Phoenix Protocol. Across the Kepler system, human ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind moons suddenly turned on their engines. But these were not the quiet, efficient drives that galactic ships used. These were fusion torches that burned like miniature suns, creating heat and light so intense that the Karvak bioships actually moved away from them. The first wave of human weapons were not energy beams or particle weapons like the Galactic fleets used. They were kinetic rounds, dense metal projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Chunks of tungsten and depleted uranium moving at significant fractions of light speed. They hit the bioships like hammers hitting eggs. The Karvak ships tried to adapt. This was what they always did. They began growing thicker armor, developing new defensive systems. changing their hull composition to better resist kinetic impacts. Their adaptive abilities were incredible. In minutes, they had developed defenses that should have stopped the human attack. But the humans simply fired more rounds. And bigger ones. "Sir, the alien ships are adapting to our kinetic weapons," Morgan reported, watching her screens as the bioships grew layers of new armor. "They are developing effective countermeasures."
Ow.
Stephen smiled, and it was not a nice smile.
Ow.
It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Perfect. Launch the special packages. From hidden compartments in the human ships, objects shot toward the Karvak fleet. To the bioships, they looked like more kinetic rounds, so they prepared their newly adapted defenses. The organic hulls thickened. The armor plates grew denser. The bioships were confident that they had solved the human puzzle. They were nuclear. Warheads. The first detonation lit up the entire system like a newborn star. Then another flash of nuclear fire. And another. The bioships, which had evolved in the cold vacuum of space, had never encountered anything like the heart of an atomic explosion. Their organic hulls, designed to heal and adapt to conventional damage, began to cook from the inside out. Radiation poured through their living tissue like poison. The same adaptive abilities that made them so dangerous now worked against them as their cells. They tried to repair radiation damage and only made it worse. The bioships that survived the initial explosions began to die slowly. Their own healing systems turned into instruments of torture. But Stevens was not finished. As the bioships struggled to adapt to nuclear weapons, trying to grow radiation-resistant tissue and develop new defensive measures, the humans launched their final surprise: biological weapons. These were not simple bombs or energy beams. These were viruses and bacteria designed specifically to target Karvak physiology.
Our
Had taught humanity that the most dangerous enemies were often the smallest ones. For thousands of years, humans had fought wars against diseases that could kill millions. Had learned to fight biology with biology. The biological weapons spread through the Karvak fleet like wildfire. The aliens' own adaptive abilities became their worst enemy as the human designed. Pathogens used the bioship's genetic flexibility against them. Every time a ship tried to adapt, the virus adapted faster. Every time they developed immunity, a new strain appeared. For the first time in their species' long history, the Karvak knew terror on the bridge of the silent death. Stevens watched as 317 bioships died in space. Some exploded from nuclear fire. Others simply stopped moving as biological weapons shut down their nervous systems. A few tried to run, but human hunter-killer ships were waiting for them. "Sir, we are receiving surrender signals," Morgan reported, her voice showing surprise. "Some of the bioships are trying to surrender." Stevens looked at the tactical display. A few dozen Karvak ships were still alive, broadcasting signals that the translation computers said meant surrender and mercy and please stop. They were begging for their lives in languages that no human had ever heard before. "Negative," Stevens said quietly. "No prisoners, no survivors. These things have eaten 43 worlds full of innocent people. They don't get to surrender now." The remaining bioships died under concentrated human fire. Nuclear weapons, kinetic rounds, biological agents, and weapons that the galactic civilization had never imagined. When it was over, the space around Kepler Station was empty, except for debris and radiation. Not a single Karvak ship escaped. In command centers across the human fleet, similar scenes were playing out. At Sigma Centauri, human ships used gravity weapons to crush Karvak bioships into dense balls of organic matter. At the Helix Nebula, they released self-replicating nanobots that dismantled enemy ships atom by atom. At Wolf 359, they used weaponized black holes to erase entire Karvak battle groups from existence. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating that they possessed weapons and tactics that no galactic species had ever conceived of. They fought like their home planet had taught them to fight, with no rules, no mercy, and no regard for what their enemies thought was possible. News of the victory at Kepler Station spread across the galaxy faster than light. The impossible had happened. The unstoppable Karvak swarm had been not just defeated, but completely annihilated. Every ship destroyed, every crew killed. Every trace of their presence erased from the system. On alien worlds, military commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. The Karvak had been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. They had been unstoppable, adaptable, and seemingly infinite in number. Now they were gone. Wiped out by a species that most aliens still thought of as primitive newcomers. But the most terrifying part was not that humans had won, it was how icily they had won. The battle at Kepler Station had lasted less than 3 hours. The humans had not even used their strongest weapons. They had treated the annihilation of 300 bioships like a training exercise in the depths of space. Other Karvak fleets received fragmentary signals from Kepler Station. The bioships were designed to share information, to learn from each battle and pass that knowledge to the rest of the swarm. But the signals they received made no sense. Pain, terror, confusion, and then nothing. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the Karvak swarm felt something they had never experienced before. Fear of another predator. Somewhere in the galaxy, something existed that could hunt them. Something that could kill them, not just individually, but completely. Something that came from a world so dangerous that it had created the galaxy's apex predator. The hunters had become the hunted. News of the victory at Kepler Station traveled across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. On every world, in every space station, on every ship, the same impossible message was being repeated. The Karvak swarm had been destroyed. Not defeated, not driven away, but completely wiped out. 317 bioships had been turned into floating debris in less than 3 hours. But Admiral Morrison knew this was just the beginning. In the war room of his flagship Leviathan, he stood in front of massive holographic displays that showed Karvak positions throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked enemy fleets, enemy breeding worlds, enemy supply lines. There were thousands of them scattered across hundreds of solar systems. Beside him stood Colonel Nathan Ford, a grizzled old soldier who had spent his entire career preparing for wars that might never come. His face was covered in scars from training accidents on Earth, where even practice combat was dangerous enough to maim or kill. He looked at the display with the cold eyes of a professional killer. "They will adapt," Ford warned, his voice rough from years of shouting orders over the sound of gunfire. "That is what they do. The next fight will not be as easy as Kepler." Station Morrison nodded. The Karvak bioships were designed to learn from every encounter, to share information across their entire species, and to develop countermeasures for any threat they encountered. Right now, somewhere in space, Karvak scientists were studying the fragmentary data from Kepler Station and trying to understand what had killed their ship so easily. "Which is why we are not giving them time to adapt," Morrison replied. "Are going to hunt them down in every system, every world, every asteroid field where they are hiding. We are going to make them understand what it means to be prey instead of predators." The human war machine that had been hidden for 5 years was finally revealing itself. These were not the peaceful exploration ships that had made first contact with the galactic community. These were weapons of war built in secret shipyards in the outer rim of human space, designed and tested in facilities that the aliens had never suspected existed. Captain Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Predator as it dropped out of hyperspace in the Vega system. The ship was part of the first hunter-killer group, fleet designed specifically to find and destroy Karvak breeding facilities before they could adapt to human tactics. "Report," Rodriguez ordered as his crew ran scans of the system. Navigation Officer Grace Thompson studied her displays, her fingers dancing across control panels that looked nothing like the elegant interfaces used by galactic ships. Human controls were built for speed and efficiency, not beauty. "Sir, we're detecting massive biosignatures on the third planet. Looks like a primary breeding facility." Rodriguez studied the tactical display that showed the planet's surface. It was covered in organic structures that pulsed with alien life. Vast biological cities where millions of juvenile Karvak were being grown in artificial wombs. This was not just a military target. This was the future of the Karvak species. Signaled the fleet, Rodriguez ordered. Deploy atmospheric processors. Quickly, they were designed to change the very air that the Karvak breathed. Humans had learned long ago that the most effective, way to destroy an enemy was to destroy their environment. The atmospheric processors spread through the planet's air like invisible death. They were machines so small that they could not be seen, but they worked together to change the chemical composition of the atmosphere. Oxygen levels dropped. Toxic gases appeared. The very air became poison to Karvak physiology, but that was only the beginning. The processors also released specially designed organisms that humans had brought from Earth, bacteria and viruses that had been modified to consume Karvak biological matter and convert it into compounds that were lethal to the aliens. It was ecological warfare on a scale that no galactic species had ever imagined. The Karvak had expected to face fleets and armies. Instead, they found themselves fighting an entire planet's atmosphere that had been turned into a weapon against them. On the surface of the breeding world, millions of juvenile Karvak began to die. The organic cities that had pulsed with life started to decay as the modified atmosphere ate through their biological structures. Adult Karvak tried to adapt, growing new organs to process the changed air. But the human organisms adapted faster. This was the key difference between human warfare and galactic warfare. The galaxy's civilized species fought with honor, with rules, with respect for their enemies. Humans fought to win, using every advantage their harsh world had taught them, as reports came in from the Vega system. Similar operations were taking place across the galaxy. At Proxima Station, human ships used gravity bombs to collapse Karvak shipyards into black holes, the Orion Nebula. They released swarms of self-replicating hunter drones that tracked down and destroyed every Karvak ship they could find. At Alpha Centauri, they deployed weapons that existed only in the darkest nightmares of theoretical physicists. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were conducting a campaign of complete extermination using methods that the galactic community would have considered war crimes, if they had ever thought such things were possible. But the most terrifying discovery came when human intelligence. Teams began studying captured Karvak technology. The bioships were not just weapons, they were entire ecosystems, complete with their own food chains, their own weather systems, their own evolutionary pressures. The Karvak had not built ships, they had grown living worlds that could travel through space. Sir, Communications Officer Amy Chen reported to Admiral Morrison, "We are getting reports from all fronts. The Karvak are beginning to show new behavior patterns." Morrison looked up from his tactical displays. "What kind of behavior?" "They are running, sir. For the first time in recorded history, Karvak forces are retreating without engaging. But they are abandoning positions, evacuating breeding worlds, and fleeing toward the galactic rim." Morrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a hunter who had successfully cornered his prey. "Good. Fear is a useful weapon. How many systems have we cleared?" 47 systems completely sterilized, sir. No surviving Karvak bioships or breeding facilities. We estimate we have eliminated approximately 30% of their total population. Around the galaxy, alien military observers watched human operations with growing horror. Humans did not just defeat enemies, they erased them. Ship was destroyed. Every breeding facility was sterilized. Every trace of Karvak presence was removed as if it had never existed. This was not war as the galaxy understood it. This was extermination conducted with scientific precision and ruthless efficiency. The humans had turned warfare into an industrial process, applying the same methodical approach they used for everything else. On the bridge of the Predator, Captain Rodriguez received new orders from Fleet Command. Grace set course for the Kepler 442 system. Intelligence reports a major Karvak fleet concentration there. Sir Thompson replied, "That is deep in Karvak territory. We would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Rodriguez laughed, and the sound made his crew smile, despite the odds they faced. "Grace, we are humans from Earth. Being outnumbered is our natural state. Besides, after what we did to them at Kepler Station, I doubt they want to fight us head-on." Any more, he was right. As human fleets pushed deeper into Karvak space, they found enemies that were no longer trying to adapt and overcome. Instead, the bioships were trying to hide, trying to run, trying to find some corner of the galaxy where the humans could not reach them. But humans had learned patience from their homeworld. They had learned persistence from fighting a planet that never stopped trying to kill them, would hunt the Karvak to the edge of the galaxy if necessary. The age of Karvak dominance was ending. The age of human ascendancy had begun.